I built my manufacturing business from a $4,000 personal loan when I was 24 years old. 8 years later, my parents sat me down at dinner and showed me documents. They said I had signed. I had never seen those papers in my life. My brother was listed as 51% owner of everything I built. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I took a photo of every page with my phone, excused myself to use the bathroom, and called my attorney from the driveway. By Monday morning, the FBI had a file with my family's names in it. My name is Maya Reeves, and I need you to understand something before I get into this. I am not a person who dramatizes things. I am not someone who goes looking for conflict, or holds grudges over small slights, or tells stories to make myself the hero. I run a precision parts manufacturing company. I employ 31 people. I deal in facts, tolerances, and documentation. So when I tell you what my family did, I need you to know I am going to give you the facts, just the facts, and I'll let you decide. I grew up in a house with 2 parents and 1 younger brother. His name is Derek. Derek is 3 years younger than me, and he has been, for as long as I can remember, the undisputed center of my parents' universe. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it the way you'd describe a weather pattern. It just was what it was. When Derek was 14, my parents bought him a brand new BMX bike for his birthday. A real one, the kind with the alloy frame and the good brakes. When I was 14, I got a card with $20 in it, and my mom told me she'd take me shopping soon. She never did. When Derek was 17 and wrecked my dad's car, my parents paid the insurance deductible, grounded him for 2 weeks, and bought him a used Honda the following month, so it wouldn't happen again. When I was 17 and needed $300 to take a summer program in industrial design at the community college, my dad told me to look into scholarships, and then spent that same weekend buying Derek new cleats and a jersey for a league he quit 6 weeks later. Derek went to a 4-year university. My parents paid his full tuition, $74,000 over 4 years. I know that number because my mother mentioned it once at Thanksgiving, out loud, as an example of what parents do for their kids. I was sitting right there. I had put myself through 2 years of community college and a certificate program in manufacturing technology while working 30 hours a week at a machine shop. She didn't seem to notice the irony, or maybe she did and didn't care. I honestly couldn't tell you which was worse. I moved out at 19. I took a small room in an apartment with 2 other women. I kept working at the machine shop, and I started learning every part of the production floor I wasn't supposed to touch yet. By 22, I was running a shift. By 23, I had saved $11,000, and I had a plan. Precision parts, aerospace-grade tolerances, small runs for companies that needed quality over volume. There was a gap in the local market, and I could see it clearly. At 24, I took a $4,000 personal loan, signed a lease on a 2,000-square-foot unit in an industrial park, and started Reeves Precision Manufacturing. I worked 16-hour days for the first 2 years. I had 1 CNC machine, and I ran it myself. I had 2 clients. I ate a lot of rice. I slept on a cot in the back office 3 nights a week because the commute was eating into production time. Nobody in my family asked how it was going. My dad came by once in the first year, looked around, said it's small, and drove home. My mom sent me a text on my first anniversary in business. It said, "Proud of you." No punctuation. I saved it, not because it meant a lot, but because it was evidence of a pattern I was already learning to document. By year 4, I had 6 employees and 12 clients. By year 6, I had moved into a 12,000-square-foot facility, had 22 employees, and was turning over just under $2 million annually. I had built something real. I had built it alone, from nothing, with no help from anyone in my family, and that mattered to me, not because I needed their approval, but because I had earned it, every single piece of it. Derek, meanwhile, had graduated with a business degree he never used, had started and abandoned 3 ventures my parents funded: a food truck, a drop-shipping store, a fitness app that never got past a PowerPoint, and was living in an apartment my parents were subsidizing. At 31 years old, he had never once visited the facility. He didn't know what a CNC machine was. He could not have told you what we manufactured if you'd paid him to answer correctly. But none of that was my problem. I had my business. I had my people. I had my peace. Until the dinner. My mother called me on a Tuesday in October and asked if I could come to dinner on Saturday. She said she had something she wanted to talk to me about as a family. That phrase, as a family, is one I had learned to treat the way you'd treat a smoke detector going off. Not a guarantee of fire, but not something to ignore either. I went. My dad was at the head of the table. My mom had made her pot roast, which she only made on holidays, or when she needed something. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting in the living room with his arms crossed, staring at his phone, not looking up when I walked in. We ate dinner. It was fine, surface level. Nobody said anything substantial. My mother asked me about the business, and I gave her a polished two-sentence answer. My dad asked about contracts in the vague way people ask about things they don't understand. Derek said nothing. Then my mother cleared the plates, and my father put a manila folder on the table. He slid it toward me. I opened it. There were 8 pages inside. The first page was a power of attorney document, dated 22 months prior. It listed my name as the grantor. It gave my parents the authority to enter into binding agreements on behalf of myself and any business entities I owned or operated. I had never signed a power of attorney. I had never spoken to anyone about signing a power of attorney. I did not recognize the notary seal. The signature on the bottom line looked like mine, the way a photocopy of a photocopy looks like a photograph. Close enough to fool someone not looking carefully, not close enough to fool me. The next several pages were a business transfer agreement. Reeves Precision Manufacturing. 51% ownership interest transferred to Derek Allen Reeves, effective immediately upon filing. My father cleared his throat. We wanted to do this in person, he said. Families should hear this kind of thing face to face. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Derek needs a foundation, she said. He's worked so hard to find himself. You have so much, Maya. You always land on your feet. We thought this was the right thing. I looked at Derek. He was still on his phone. He glanced up for exactly 1 second, met my eyes, and looked back down. He didn't look guilty. He looked bored. That told me everything. I closed the folder. I looked at my father. I said, "When did I sign this?" He said, "About 2 years ago." "You don't remember?" I said, "I have never signed a power of attorney. Not for you. Not for anyone. Not ever." My mother started to say something about how I was tired, and maybe I'd forgotten, and I held up one hand. I said, "I'm going to need to take this with me." My father shook his head. "We need that back. Our lawyer has the originals." I said, "You have a lawyer?" He said, "We wanted to do this properly." I said, "You should have wanted to do this legally." I stood up from the table. I took my phone out of my pocket. I photographed every page of that folder. While they watched, 8 photos, clean, well lit, every word legible. My mother said my name twice. My father said I was overreacting. Derek still didn't look up from his phone. I put the folder back on the table, picked up my jacket, and walked to the door. My dad said, "Maya, we're your family." I said, "I know," and I left. I sat in my car for 4 minutes. Then I called my attorney. My attorney's name is Sandra Okafor. She has been my business lawyer since year 2. She is methodical, she is thorough, and she does not rattle easily. When I described the documents to her from my car, in my parents' driveway, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Send me those photos right now. Don't go back inside. Go home." I sent them. She called me back 40 minutes later. She had looked at the power of attorney. She said, "This is a forged document, Maya. The notary seal is real. Someone used a real notary, but the signature is not yours. I have your signature on file from the original business formation documents. These don't match." I asked her what we needed to do. She told me. The next 72 hours were the busiest of my life, outside of starting the company. On Sunday, I called a forensic document examiner named Gerald Chu, who Sandra had used before. I sent him the photos, and he agreed to an emergency consultation Monday morning. On Sunday night, I drove to the facility, changed the door codes, changed the locks on the main office, and spent 4 hours pulling every original document I had: formation papers, IN registration, my lease, client contracts, bank account records, and photographing them all into a cloud archive. I created that night with a new password that no one in my family had ever been near. Monday morning, Gerald Chu confirmed what Sandra had already already said. The signature was not mine. He said it was a careful forgery, not amateur, but that the pen pressure was wrong. The letter formation on my capital R was notably different from every authentic sample, and there were 3 tells in the notarial block that suggested the notary had been given false identification or had participated knowingly. Sandra filed a fraud alert with the county recorder's office that afternoon. Any attempt to file transfer documents against my business would trigger an automatic hold. She also sent a cease and desist letter to my parents' lawyer, a man named Phil Drennan, who turned out to be a general practice attorney who mostly did wills and fender benders and had apparently not told my parents that what they were attempting was a federal crime. Then Sandra said, "I think you should also contact the FBI." I said, I was already thinking that. Document fraud, forged notarization, attempted fraudulent business transfer. These are not civil matters. These are federal. I called the FBI field office Tuesday morning. I spoke to an agent named Torres. I gave her the photos, Gerald Chu's preliminary findings, and the name of the notary on the document. She said she would be in touch. That was Tuesday. On Thursday, Derek showed up at my facility. He didn't call ahead. He didn't email. He just drove up in the car my parents were still helping him pay for, and walked in through the front entrance at 10:15 in the morning, like he owned the place, which in his mind, he apparently did. He walked past the front desk, where my office manager Keisha told him he needed to stop, and he said, and I am quoting him directly, "It's fine. I'm family." He walked toward my office. Keisha called me on my cell. I came out of the production floor and found Derek standing in the hallway, outside my office door, trying the handle. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I want to look at the books." I said, "You don't have access to the books." He said, "I'm a 51% owner. I have more access than you." I said, "You are not an owner of this company. You never were. Those documents are forged. You need to leave." He stepped toward me. He got closer than I was comfortable with, and his voice dropped in that way. Men's voices drop when they think volume is a substitute for argument. He said, "Mom and Dad did this legally. You signed that paper. You just don't remember because you're always too busy playing CEO." I said, "Get out of my building." He said, "Our building," and he shoved me, both hands, hard enough that I stepped back into the doorframe. My foreman, a man named Carl who is 6'2" and has been with me for 5 years, came around the corner from the production floor. At exactly that moment, he had heard the voices. He stepped between us without being asked. He looked at Derek and said very quietly, "You need to leave right now." Derek looked at Carl. Derek looked at me. He said, "This isn't over." Carl walked him out, all the way to his car. Stood there until the car left the lot. I went to my desk, pulled up the security camera system, and clipped the footage. Derek shoving me, his face clearly visible, the timestamp, everything. I called Sandra. She told me to file a police report immediately and to preserve the original footage in multiple locations. I filed the report that afternoon. The officer who took my statement looked at the footage and shook his head slowly. He said, "Ma'am, this is assault, and based on the context, we may be talking about more than that." He took a copy of the footage. I gave Sandra another copy. I uploaded it to the cloud archive. I emailed it to myself from 3 different email addresses. Then I went back to work because I had 31 employees and a production schedule, and I was not going to let my brother's entitlement cost a single one of them a paycheck. The calls started that weekend. First, it was my mother. She called 4 times Saturday. I let it go to voicemail. The first message was sad. She talked about how much she loved me, how she just wanted Derek to have a chance, how I had so much and he had so little, how family is supposed to lift each other up. The second message was less sad. She mentioned that Phil Drennan, their lawyer, believed their position was legally sound. The third message was angry. She told me I was destroying the family and that I would regret this when they were gone. The fourth message was just crying. No words, just her crying into the phone for 40 seconds. I saved all 4. Then my dad called. His message was short. He said, "Maya, stop making this a war. You have enough. Share some of it. That's what family does." I saved that one too. Then my mother posted on Facebook. I only saw it because a cousin screenshot it and sent it to me. It was a photo of our family from about 10 years ago. All 4 of us at some birthday dinner with a caption that said, "Family is everything." When times get hard, real family stands together. Not everyone understands that. Praying for those who've forgotten where they came from and who built them up. God knows the truth. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. Within 24 hours, the calls started from people I hadn't spoken to in years. My Aunt Patrice, my mother's sister, called and said she'd heard I was going after the family, and that whatever the disagreement was, I should think about the big picture. I told Aunt Patrice that someone had forged my signature on a legal document and attempted to transfer half my business to a person who had never worked a day in it. Silence. Then, well, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. I said, there hasn't. She didn't call again. My cousin Terrell, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, texted me a paragraph about forgiveness and letting go of material things. I sent him a screenshot of the forensic document examiner's preliminary report. He left it on read. My mother's friend Dolores, who I had met maybe 6 times in my life, called to tell me that my mother was devastated and that money isn't worth losing your family over. I told Dolores that what my family had done was a federal crime and that I hoped she understood the difference between a family disagreement and document fraud. She said, "Oh my," and hung up. Then came my grandfather, my father's father, Grandpa Roy, who I had not spoken to in 6 years, after he told me at a Christmas dinner that women who put business first end up alone and bitter. He called me on a Sunday morning. He said he'd heard there was trouble and that he wanted to help smooth things over. He said my parents had made a mistake in how they handled it, sure, but that Derek was struggling, and I should find it in my heart to bring him in to the business in some capacity. I asked Grandpa Roy one question. I said, "Did you know about the documents before they showed me?" Long pause. He said, "I heard something about a plan." "Yes." I said, "Then you're not calling to smooth things over. You're calling to see if it worked." He started to say my name. I said, "Don't call me again, Roy," and I hung up. I blocked his number. I blocked Derek. I blocked my parents on everything. I left the Facebook screenshot as evidence and asked a colleague to monitor that page for any further posts. She found 3 more over the next 2 weeks, each one more plaintive than the last, each one about family loyalty, about God seeing the truth, about children who forget their roots. She screenshotted every one. I added them to the file. The legal process took 4 months. I want to walk you through what that actually looked like, because I think people have a vague sense of lawyer stuff happens and then jump to the outcome, and I want you to understand the weight of what those 4 months were. Sandra filed a civil suit against my parents and Derek for fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted conversion of business assets, and damages. The FBI separately opened a criminal investigation into the forged power of attorney and the notarization. Agent Torres called me 6 weeks in and told me they had identified the notary. Her name was Linda Ferris. She was a woman my mother had gone to church with for 11 years. My mother had asked her to notarize the document and shown her a photocopy of my driver's license. Linda Ferris had notarized it without the signatory present, which is not legal, which she knew. Agent Torres said Linda Ferris had cooperated fully. Within about 40 minutes of being contacted, Phil Drennan, my parents' attorney, withdrew from the case. 2 days after receiving Sandra's civil suit, my parents hired a new lawyer, a woman named Karen Stiles, who I could tell from her filings was quietly horrified by what she had inherited. The deposition was in February. I want to tell you about the deposition. My parents sat across a conference table from me. For the first time since that dinner in October, my mother had lost weight. My father looked like he hadn't slept in a month. Derek sat next to them, in a jacket I recognized as the one my parents had bought him for a job interview 2 years ago. He was still wearing it. Sandra asked my father, under oath, how the power of attorney document had come to exist. My father said he had found a template online and that he believed Maya had signed it. Sandra showed him a side-by-side comparison of my actual signature and the forged one. She asked him, "Does this look like the same signature to you?" He was quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. He said, "I believed it was." Sandra showed him the forensic report. She showed him Gerald Chu's analysis. She showed him 3 separate signature comparisons from my business formation documents, my lease, and a client contract. She said, "Mr. Reeves, in your professional opinion, or in any opinion you hold, do these signatures match?" My father looked at the papers. He looked at his lawyer. He said, "I thought we were doing what was right for our family." Sandra said, That wasn't the question. Then she asked Derek whether he had visited Reeves Precision Manufacturing on the date in question. He said yes. She asked whether he had made physical contact with me. He said, "It was an accident." Sandra played the security camera footage on a laptop, facing the deposition camera. 11 seconds of footage. Derek's hands, my body hitting the door frame, Carl stepping in. Sandra said, "Does that appear accidental to you?" Derek's lawyer put her hand on his arm. He said nothing. Then came the part I had been waiting for. Sandra asked my mother, who had cried twice already in the deposition, why she had asked Linda Ferris to notarize the document. My mother said she thought it was just a formality. Sandra said, "A formality requires the signatory to be present. Were you aware of that requirement?" My mother said, "I'm not a lawyer." Sandra said, "You're correct, but you are the person who provided a photocopy of your daughter's ID to a notary and asked her to certify a signature that your daughter had not provided. Is that accurate?" My mother looked at me, not at Sandra, at me, like I was going to help her. I looked back at her, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not anger, nothing, just nothing. Like a door that had been rattling in its frame for 32 years had finally, quietly closed. My mother said, "I wanted Derek to have something." Sandra said, "He already has something. He has parents who have given him everything. What you tried to take was your daughter's." The civil case settled in March. My parents were ordered to pay $84,000 in damages and legal fees. Karen Stiles had apparently told them correctly that going to trial would result in significantly worse. They paid. Linda Ferris received a formal censure and lost her notary commission. The FBI's criminal review of the forgery resulted in a referral to the district attorney. At the time I'm telling you this story, that process is still ongoing. Derek was separately named in a civil harassment action for the incident at my facility. That settled for $11,000. He paid it in installments. My parents paid those installments. Of course they did. After the settlement, my mother called me one time. She said that they had paid what the court said they owed, and that she hoped that meant we could put this behind us. I said, "No." She said, "Maya, we're your family." I said, "I know what you are." She said that they were cutting contact with me if I wasn't willing to move forward. I said, "Okay." She said, "You're really okay with that?" I said, "Mom, you forged my signature. You tried to steal my company. Derek assaulted me at my own facility, and then you spent 4 months having your relatives call me to ask me to be understanding. So yes, I'm okay with that." She hung up. That was the last conversation I had with either of my parents. Derek sent me one text 3 weeks later. It said, "Hope you're happy." I blocked him. The relatives mostly stopped calling once it became clear I wasn't going to change my position. A few of them, the ones I'd sent documentation to, went quiet in a different way. The quiet of people who had been fed one version of a story and then received evidence that the story was a lie and didn't know what to do with that. I don't know what those family dinners look like now. I don't know what my mother posts on Facebook. I had her blocked before the ink was dry on the settlement. What I know is what my life looks like. 18 months after that dinner in October, Reeves Precision Manufacturing has 38 employees. We are on track to cross $3 million in revenue this fiscal year. I signed 2 new aerospace contracts in January, and we are expanding into a second unit in the same industrial park, another 8,000 square feet, a new 5-axis machine, 3 new hires starting in April. I did not give a single share of this company to anyone, not because I'm selfish, but because I earned every inch of it, and the people who tried to take it showed me exactly what they thought I was worth when they decided a forged signature was an acceptable shortcut. My friend Dara, who has known me since the community college days, asked me once during all of this whether I ever felt guilty, whether I woke up in the night and wondered if I should have just given Derek something, found a role for him, made peace. I thought about it honestly. I said, "No." She said, "Not even a little?" I said, "He shoved me in my own building, in front of my employees. He came to take something I built from nothing, without working a single day to earn it, and my parents forged my name to make it happen. What exactly am I supposed to feel guilty about?" She didn't have an answer. Neither did I. Some people will hear this story and say I should have found a way to keep the family together. That blood is blood. That I'll regret it someday, maybe. But I've been hearing some version of that line my whole life. You have so much, Maya. You always always land on your feet, Maya. Just give a little, Maya. Family helps family, Maya. And underneath every single one of those lines was the same translation. You built it so we can take it. That's not family. That's not love. That's just entitlement, dressed up in the language of love. I don't miss them. I miss the idea of a family that was never real, and I'm done grieving for something that was never there to begin with. I built this company alone. I will keep building it alone, and that is more than enough.